Welcome back. A few years ago, President Obama was essentially promising that 2015 would be the year that Americans could stop worrying about wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And technically, U.S. combat operations did formally come to a close in Afghanistan in 2014. However, here are the facts. There are still going to be 11,000 American soldiers remaining in the country just as chaos is beginning thanks to a resurgent Taliban. And there will soon be 3,000 American troops in Iraq, where the situation there is, if anything, bleaker, thanks to ISIS slaughtering thousands and controlling large swaths of that country as well as Syria. So we asked our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, to take a look at what appear to be wars now without an end.
ISIS now has a new kind of brutal propaganda tool. The group is asking for tips online on how it should murder a Jordanian pilot it captured in Syria last month, the first coalition pilot to be taken captive. Suggestions have been tragically pouring in, including impalement and burning him alive. ISIS hardly seems deterred by the U.S.-led war against it, now in its 7th month. 2014 was the year when old wounds and old wars in the Middle East many Americans hoped were over returned to center stage. Syria imploded, allowing ISIS to explode onto the scene. And Iraq, well, the U.S. is now back at war there with around 3,000 troops on an increasingly dangerous training mission.
The Iraqi army came apart. 25% of it ran off and left their equipment. But it's hard to imagine a modest training mission being the key to gluing Iraq back together. I think it's come apart, and it will now have to settle along new geopolitical grounds.
The war in Afghanistan won't go away either. Last month, the president, in a very understated ceremony, announced the end of the combat mission there after 13 years. America's longest war ended with the faintest of whimpers.
We've been in continuous war now for almost 13 years, over 13 years, and next week we will be ending our combat mission in Afghanistan.
But the war isn't really ending, and military families will still have to keep giving. Around 10,000 U.S. troops will remain in Afghanistan to support local security forces. The mission's success is far from certain.
It's hard to imagine the Afghan army and police pulling together these disparate factions. So I think bad news in Afghanistan is what we ought to expect.
For the U.S. military, 2015 will focus on preventing old wars from getting even worse, which means those conflicts will continue to be a drain on American resources and perhaps a distraction from what could be the real security challenges, like Iran's nuclear program or cyber warfare. The U.S. now seems to be in a semi-permanent state of war, unable to break from the past. For Meet the Press, I'm Richard Engel.